Hey guys, welcome back to a delayed week 17 of the Axial Deadbolt budget build. This week what we're going to get into is the installation of a winch in the front of this rig. Now, what I've got here is the 3 racing winch. A lot of you guys have probably seen this. A lot of you have probably even used it. Now, this isn't something that I have typically used. Typically, I've gone with something a little bit stronger or faster, or something along those lines, rather than just a straight up 3 racing winch. But in this build, I'm not just going to use this winch as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a couple of option parts from Locked Up RC. Now, the reason that I chose the 3 racing winch is because Locked Up RC has released a free spool kit. This is their Commander free spool kit for the 3 racing winch. And if you're not familiar what free spool means, that is when you're pulling the winch line out from the winch. Now, if you're competing and you have to winch, you need to sit there and typically unspool that line by running the motor in the reverse direction. So it goes out as fast as your winch is able to spool it, which typically is not that fast. And when you're on a course, on clock, and time really counts, those 5 seconds or 10 seconds that it could take to winch out as much line as you need can really start eating up into the time that you need to get through a course. So with this free spool kit, what you're going to be able to do is press in on the side of the winch and just pull that line out as fast as you can pull it out, and then you're ready to start winching it right back in. A huge time saver, and even if you're on the trail, it's just kind of annoying sometimes to sit there and have to wait for your winch to spool out. So this is something that full-scale winches have, but our winches have typically been lacking. Now, also, while I'm in there, I'm also going to install one of the upgraded higher speed gear motors from Locked Up as well. This will give us a little bit more power and a little bit more speed out of that winch also. So this winch is really going to get a pretty major overhaul today. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the process of installing this kit into our 3 racing winch. As far as the actual install of the winch into the vehicle, we're going to save that for another week, as there's some other things that I'm going to do as well when it comes to how we're going to control that winch in the vehicle. But again, we'll get to that in a later week. When we're finishing up the install of that Commando free spool kit and the upgraded winch, I'm also going to do a couple of other things. Locked Up also has a number of winching accessories, and I'm going to use several of those for a couple of reasons. If you've ever used the winch hook that comes with that 3 racing winch, you'll probably know that it's not very strong and pretty easy to break. So I picked up one of Locked Up's RC's little water or laser cut winch hooks there. This is a nice size winch hook, not too large, but it's got a nice big opening to be able to hook on to some pretty large objects when you're winching. Sometimes those really small hooks that come with something like the 3 racing winch, you can't necessarily get it around a tube or a bar or something like that in another vehicle, which you're going to use to winch off of. So I'm going to install that. I've also got 15 feet of Locked Up RC's 200-pound synthetic winch line, and I'm going to use that as well because that braided rope type stuff that comes on the 3 racing winch, not that strong either. And then while I was at it, I also just went ahead and picked up a few of their other little options. Some of these won't necessarily go in the budget, but I thought I'd show them to you guys as well. They've got some miniature scale-style toe straps. These are a regular scale style of what you would see on the course. This thing I think I'll use probably as a scale accessory on something. One other little accessory I picked up was one of Locked Up RC's little galvanized D-rings. Cool little setup, looks very scale. I probably will install this on the front bumper. That SSD RC front bumper's got the little spots for the D-rings specifically, so I'll probably throw that on there, and that's probably where I'll hook my winch line to while I'm at rest. And lastly, I've got the winch hook saver. This thing goes between the winch hook and it goes over the line behind the winch hook and just kind of saves it when you pull it against the bumper. It gives it a more of a cushioned area to hold against. So those are all the accessories that I've got for this winch. Again, pretty major overhaul to a simple winch, but when it's done, it's going to have a lot more upgrades than you typically see in one of those little winches coming off the bat. So to start this install, we're going to remove the plate on the bottom of the winch that holds the fair lead on. Remove the 4 Phillips head screws. Also, I'm just going to cut off that stock hook because I'm not planning on using it or the winch line that came with it. Put that plate aside, we're actually not going to use it. Next, we're going to remove the 2 screws on the top side of the right side of this winch. That'll allow that stock end cap to come off. From there, you can slightly feed the wire out as you pull on that motor and spool assembly, and it'll all start coming loose, and you can remove it from there. I'm going to clip off the wires on that motor because, again, I'm going to be replacing this motor with a little bit hotter setup. So this is what we're left with basically. It's basically the left side housing of the 3 racing winch. This is where we're going to start adding the parts from locked up RC. This is the new setup, and that is the old. You will see that there's a hole down there. Also, the bearing size is significantly larger on the new locked up. We're going to start by putting the brass bushing from the kit all the way down inside that new housing from locked up. Then we're going to put the new larger bearing in. This is the brand new spool, a little bit different setup than the last one. Take the pin that is included with the kit, slide it through the spool here. This is a little roll pin that we're going to need to install, or a spring pin. It is a little bit difficult. You may need to kind of pinch one end just slightly to get it to feed through. After that, use a pair of needle nose to get it pushed halfway through that new pin that we put through the new spool. It'll hold itself in place after that. This washer next you install next to that spring pin, followed by the spring from the kit as well. Put a little bit of Loctite on that small 2mm screw that's included with the kit. This is going to thread inside of that shaft that went inside of the spool. Get it all lined up on that new side of the housing and thread in that 2mm screw all the way down. Again, I'm going to be using this hotter motor setup, so we're going to remove it from the pack. Note on the end, it does have a plus and minus denoted. So I'm going to feed that original wire that we had from the stock setup. I've already trimmed these wires slightly back and tinned the leads, and then I'm going to solder those leads onto our new motor. These tiny little leads go pretty quick, so properly tinning both sides of the wire and motor makes things go nice and quickly and without adding too much heat. As a reminder, you do need to put the lead through the housing and then solder it to that motor. If you don't, you'll end up with a setup that you cannot get fed back through that housing. Now we're going to take the new smaller bearing and put it over the shaft that goes from that brand new gear motor from locked up. A washer may be needed between that bearing and this spool depending on how much slop you have. So you may have to go back to this step. Line up the two halves of that setup with the spool, get it all lined up, and then start to tighten in the right side screws that we removed previously. That's going to conclude the actual construction of the winch. Now to install it, I'm going to use 2 longer 2mm screws with a hex head on it rather than those 4 Phillips head screws that were on the stock winch plate. I'm going to be installing this to my SSD RC front bumper that we touched on many weeks ago.
That wraps up the actual installation of that Commando winch kit as well as that hotter motor inside of our Stage 3 winch. Now, right now it's not hooked up to the wiring in the truck. We'll get to that again in a later week. I've got some things that I want to change up there and show you guys exactly what I'm going to do. Again, using a winch is going to require you to have at least a 3-channel radio if you're going to control it from the radio. There are some other methods with some external controllers, but I want to control it from the radio, and that's the direction that I'll show you guys what is required. Now that will require a different radio than the stock radio, and that's not something that I'm going to actually include in the budget. If you guys are ones that want to actually include something that uses a 3-channel winch or a 3-channel controller, that's something that you're going to have to decide exactly what you want to go with. I'm a Futaba driver, so I'm going to use Futaba products. But again, personal preferences, a million choices out there in all different budget ranges. Now, even without this winch hooked up into the truck, I can still show you what we accomplished by installing it. Now, again, if you were running a standard 3 racing winch, you would have to reverse the polarity with your controller and wait for it to slowly spool out. Now, we installed a hotter motor, so that would spool out quicker than a standard winch would. But with the Commando free spool system, what we do is we come in, we pull on the end of that bolt, and then we just pull out as much winch line as we like. Right there, I pulled out as much as I could reach, basically as quick as you can pull that on there. Then, when you're done, all you do is you start spooling in that winch. The spring catch inside of there will pull that closed, and then it will start winching in. So, that's what we did, and that's how quick that can happen. Very big time saver when you're on course, or even if you're just not the most patient type of person, maybe like me, when you're out on the trail, and if you want a winch, you want it done right now. But that's what we accomplished this week. I did forget to order a fair lead for this thing, so that's not 100% complete. I'll have to get that thrown on there. But other than that, watch for future weeks where we're going to hook up this winch to the entire car, and we'll show you exactly how that happens. If that happens next week or not totally sure yet. We'll see exactly how everything plays out. But with that and with all we did this week, we'll see you guys on the next one.